Welcome to today's podcast as we are today examining some of the things happening in the Southern Baptist Convention. We're looking at the decline of the Cooperative Program giving and the controversy that has arisen over Dr. Jeff, our Executive Committee Chair, over his report that happened just a couple of weeks ago now, but has really stimulated a lot of conversation, and he's addressed it back at one time, but pretty unsatisfactorily for many. And so we want to address that today as we move forward. So joining me today are two pastors. We're glad to have them joining us today. One from Louisiana, Dwayne Rogers, in a church there, and then Warren Gilpin, now in Maryland. We're glad to have both you guys joining us today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you, Bobby.
Well, let's summarize real quickly a couple of things. First, we need to understand the Cooperative Program is the unified giving approach that Southern Baptists have had since it was instituted in 1925. Prior to that time, there was what was called a societal way of giving, which meant that every entity of the Southern Baptist Convention, every school, every whatever it was, whatever the entity was, a mission board or whatever, they could go, and they did go church to church to church, and they solicited for funds. So on any given Sunday, realistically, a church could have 2 or 3 different people from entities show up at their church and want to solicit funds. In other words, take a special offering. So it had gotten very difficult for many churches trying to participate, and they realized that their funds and their people were just being peppered at times by this constant solicitation. So eventually they put together just it's really the best cooperative giving method that's ever been known to man, which they call the Cooperative Program in 1925. And it basically said that if every church will contribute something, everybody can make an equal sacrifice as such and be able to join together in doing things that you might not be able to do if you're working separately. So to set the case, now we're in 2025. It's the 100th year celebrating the Cooperative Program. We've seen a constant decline of the Cooperative Program over the past years, and it's been rather disconcerting. Let's say it that way. It's been a little bit disconcerting. Before we jump into the remarks that Dr. Iorg made, let's quickly look at this is just a chart that was put together from 1995 up until what we have seen in recent days. And so let's look real quickly here. There we go. This chart coming from 95 up and through this last fiscal year that they have reported. And notice the up and down. The red line there is the designated giving, and the darker line is the Cooperative Program giving. Now, one thing this has not been adjusted for, this is not adjusted for inflation over these decades. So you have several decades of inflation, and really over the last 10 years or so, our inflation rate has gone up about 37 to almost 40% in that time. So these lines, if adjusted for inflation, would be significantly more at that point. Dwayne, when we look at the Cooperative Program giving and the changes between designated giving and the Cooperative Program giving, what stands out to you right offhand?
Well, obviously, we see from when the GCR recommendations were implemented, there were some churches who apparently gave less to the Cooperative Program and started giving, maintained their giving, but just gave less through the CP and started designating it through to other Southern Baptist causes. That's something to me is very noteworthy. And that's what the leadership honestly was encouraging at that point, though. I was there in Florida when those recommendations were adopted, and that was really my only concern at that point about their recommendations, was that it was going to hurt the CP and, quite frankly, allow the election of some officers who whose churches were giving less than what was traditionally accepted at a 10% that time. So but that certainly came true.
Well, we've had other discussions about the impact of the Great Commission resurgence that happened there in 2010 and began being implemented in 2011. And so we won't go into a lot of depth on that, but one of the significant things that was approved in the GCR was the approval of what they call Great Commission giving, where particularly large mega churches who were in the past, we had many of those large churches that wanted to keep most of their own money to be involved in their own mission work. And so they would designate money. They wanted control over it. So they might not give to the cooperative program, but 0.5%, 1%, 1.5%, 2%, a very small amount. When the concept of the cooperative program in the beginning was, hey, look, if everybody will give 10% of their undesignated gifts across the board, it's equal sacrifice, but yet we are able to do things together we couldn't do alone. And that was very true for churches the size of the churches you and I have been pastoring and been a part of for years and years, that normative sized church, without any question. The chart is a little bit alarming, and we may come back and talk about that a little bit more. Let's talk about what happened with this executive committee report. Dr. Jeff Iorg made a report in which he makes several statements that have been of great concern. One of them he sets up talking about the shift, a cultural shift to what he calls expressive individualism that has impacted our churches, thus creating this very untenable system for accounting and other things at the executive committee where our cooperative program dollars are sorted, saying that by churches restricting their gifts to various entities, maybe a church doesn't want to give to Southwestern Seminary or to New Orleans or to whatever, or to the ERLC or to NAM, they may contribute and say, give my cooperative program dollars divided up, but do not give it to. And in his report, which we can't play the whole thing today, but you can, we put it down in the video description, so you can click there and listen to his full report there, but we are going to take some snippets of it. But at this point, the clip I'm about to show you, he's setting that up and has said that in their last accounting period, they had to basically accommodate configurations of more than 30 different configurations of giving to the cooperative program, or giving through the cooperative program would be more accurate. So let's watch this clip real fast, and then I want to come out of that, and Dwayne, ask you to follow up on that as we come out of it.
While there are programmatic and political reasons for these current changes.
Okay, hang on just a second. I hit the wrong button there again. Okay.
Important factor is the philosophy.
Okay, we'll back it up here so we can get that whole thing so you get it. All right. Okay, here we go.
While there are programmatic and political reasons for these current changes, a more important factor is the philosophical commitment underlining these developments. Changes in the cooperative program are rooted in a worldview shift that has marked Western culture and unfortunately bled into SBC life. The problem is the fracturing influence of expressive individualism, the dominant worldview of our time. Expressive individualism is the root of cultural developments ranging from obsessive sharing on social media to convincing children they can choose their own gender. It is the worldview which demands mass customization and at the same time fuels aggressive tribalism. Southern Baptists live in this cultural milieu and are being influenced by it. This is troubling because expressive individualism is theologically and philosophically antithetical to cooperation, which is the theological and philosophical foundation of our combined efforts.
Bobby, I was listening to Dr. Orr's report being given live to the executive committee that evening, And immediately I felt offended because my initial impression of what we just saw in that clip, and again, I saw his entire report, but that particularly that portion right there, when he says the problem is expressive individualism, cultural people adapting to cultural changes, and in fact, compared my church to children being allowed to choose their genders. I mean, I was just offended by that, and that was my immediate response to that. I later went back and listened to it again that very evening, and have seen it replayed a number of times since. Have read his transcript that he emailed out, and that has not lessened my views. As a matter of fact, my views are even stronger, and being reassured of what I heard was indeed correct, what he said. It's really sad. Culture hasn't changed me. I've been a proponent of the CP since 1987, when I was ordained into the ministry, and it wasn't until last year when I finally lost some hope, hearing that NAM just refused to follow along with some recommendations, and refused to be transparent, that we started giving, directing some of our giving directly to mission causes rather than going through the CP.
Dwayne, let me ask you this then.
Yes.
On a personal level in your church, and Warren, I'll come over to you too, but let's start with you, Dwayne. On a personal level, do you see this cultural explanation he gives of expressive individualism, is that reflected in your church's giving?
Absolutely not. Absolutely. The reason for our change
is the decline, I was going to say, is the decline more about trust and transparency in leadership decisions then?
That's what it's totally about. Absolutely. It's not related to cultural changes at all.
I agree. And in our case, one of the things that continues to be asked is why is a specific entity allowed to choose what part of the SBC Constitution that they're going to follow or not follow? Because some of our folks, have read that document and don't understand why the questions are not being asked. And then the second part of that comes back to, well, if they don't have anything to hide, why do they care? And so I don't see our giving changing because of what's going on around us. I'm now pastoring in a college community. And I have not, in the time I've been here and talked with folks and listened to folks and done the things that we're doing. When you go to a new place, a new place to serve, you hear the stuff. Well, this is what we've done, and this is why we've done it, including their CP giving. And that was one of the first things they addressed when I came here, was their CP giving and their state convention giving and that kind of thing. And it had everything I was told had zero to do with the culture and everything to do with transparency.
Okay, Dwayne, let me come back to you real quick, and let's try to keep our responses brief, if I can say that in a polite way. But any I say that because any one of these questions could take us an hour. But Dwayne, how do designated gifts versus cooperative program gifts, how do they reflect local concerns at this point among you and your congregation and others that you relate to that are pastors and churches in your area?
Well, I'll shoot exactly. And the way they reflect it is we're no longer giving as much through our cooperative program to our state. So therefore, because our state does not allow us to negatively designate in my state, some states do. I wished we did, because I would continue to funnel it all through our state so that the state agencies would be funded. But since they don't allow that, it's not only affecting here what's going on in my state of Louisiana, but also we've cut out NAM because NAM is not being transparent. We've cut out giving to the ERLC because of past concerns about that. So those are the only two areas that that we would like to choose to negatively designate at this point, but can't. So therefore, we're giving directly to IMB, directly to several missionaries that we know in the IMBC. Matter of fact, we calculated our gifts to the SBC have not decreased; they've actually increased when you're counting all the SBC causes. We're just not sending it through the cooperative program.
You know, one of the things I think we need to remember that it wasn't really until about 3, maybe 4 years ago, probably post the Nashville annual meeting, when so many issues had been raised about transparency, the lack of transparency, all the houses that were being bought by the North American Mission Board. You had a number of things, a lot of it related initially to the North American Mission Board, but other issues that had been raised since the passing of the Great Commission resurgence. And prior to that time, state conventions didn't allow any negative designation, any negative restriction. But since that time, most of the conventions now will say, because the funnel goes like this: your local church takes its offering from the undesignated gifts. You took your cooperative program dollars, you sent those dollars to the state convention in your state, and then the state convention then sent it to the executive committee. They retain some of it, cooperative program dollars, in the state convention. They sent forward a percentage of it to the executive committee, and then the executive committee disperses it to the entities and other organizations that are supported, including supporting the executive committee. And so you didn't basically negative designate or restrict. Since that time, almost every convention has now made that a possibility, that your church can now say, we don't trust NAM until they become transparent. We don't trust the ERLC. We're unhappy with the direction the ERLC is going, whatever it is. Or maybe they're upset with Southwestern Seminary over something or whatever. And they can basically say, here's our cooperative program dollars. Do not give any to A, B, and C for 2 or 3 negative designations. And that's a total change from where we have been. I never saw that as being driven by anything culturally at all. It was totally within the convention. Okay, let's jump back into his report. Let's move forward again. He a little further down talks about the importance of cooperating even when we disagree. And so listen to what he has to say. And then Warren, I want to come to you and ask about how significant this is. And if this is, I asked the question in a Facebook group, was his report just tone deaf for who Southern Baptists are or not? And this is another one of those portions of his report that made me ask that question. Okay, let's watch.
Cooperation means working willingly with people who do not agree with you on everything. Expressive individualism insists you have your way and only work with people who agree with you, or better, will reward you for your individual choices. Cooperation means you sacrifice to achieve common goals, not leverage gifts to enforce your personal preferences. Cooperation means you surrender control to fellow Baptists you elect, which is anathema to expressive individualists. The current tribalism and continuing reshuffling of sectarian loyalties in the SBC is a byproduct of this worldview shift. People demand their positions prevail, continually realign with others who share their perspective, and will only fund what they find amenable. This creates an ever-changing kaleidoscope of collaborations demanding new funding channels.
Okay, Warren, let me just simply ask, how does cooperation happen when local churches disagree with significant decisions or they feel excluded from transparency?
Well, they change how they give. If they can't, if there isn't accountability, and that's what we're asking for. And you didn't ask, but real quick, I was a little bit insulted by some of his comments, but because he's accusing the church that I serve of not just yielding to the worldview, but also not being cooperative. And one of the things that I said with the GCR when we were in Orlando, I said, I'm really tired of being told that if I don't support the Great Resurgence Task Force, that I don't believe or support the Great Commission. I never put those two things together. Like the two of you, I have supported the Cooperative Program. I wouldn't serve a church that didn't give 10% of its budget to the Cooperative Program. But we had some accountability. We knew where the money went. I can't tell the members of our finance team, this is where the money goes. I was asked not long ago, where does Lottie Moon go? Does it still go to the mission field, to those missionaries? Where does, what is done with the money? What's the overhead? And it just amazes me that he's playing the blame game in quite just pointed form. He's blaming the churches for redirecting their giving using, I think the word that he used, this creates an ever-changing kaleidoscope of collaborations demanding new funding channels. Well, yeah, and one of the things that Dwayne said, and I agree with that, and I haven't checked this particular church, but the church that I served previously, our CP giving went up if you count what we did for missions locally as well as individually, and supported them. We just didn't send it to NAM to do something with.
Yeah, so it fell under the umbrella of what they termed Great Commission giving.
Correct.
Which is, to me, they set up the structure for exactly what's happening.
Yes.
Now, not the negative designation.
No.
That started coming as a result of in my view, a lack of leadership, the poor leadership, the lack of transparency, et cetera, et cetera. That was a response to that. And state conventions knew they needed to respond because too many churches were either saying, I'm cutting off CP giving 100%, no longer giving at all, or they were saying, we're reducing this or we're escrowing this until we get some transparency and find out where the millions of dollars that are going to NAM are actually being used, and not just, well, that was church planting. And they hear reports of NAM paying for church planters going to, a professional baseball game and going to a play in downtown in the Fox Theater and I mean, just exorbitant expenses, and think, where is our money going? Then the revelation of all these houses that were being bought, millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of houses, some of those houses as high with the one they recorded in Arizona that NAM had purchased was $725,000, something like that, or $750 or something. Anyway, it was exorbitant, unbelievable. But Dwayne, does lack of clear communication or top-down decision-making hinder cooperation? Is that what's hindering it, or is it something else?
Oh, absolutely. Because as we all know, or at least us three know, that the convention, the ideal of that is that the headquarters of the Southern Baptist Convention is in the local churches, and then so their desires are expressed upward and or hope to be carried out upwards. I realize there's going to be differences. It's very important. I've been serving at the church that I'm at now for 5 years, and Bobby, when I went to that church, when they asked me to become their pastor, they were asking me then, has the SBC cleared up some transparency issues? Or are they more open right now? So this is not something that has just come on the horizon the last 2 or 3 years. This, by my church, the church that I'm pastor now, was being asked over 5 years ago.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not a brand new topic. Warren, go ahead.
No, and I was in the last church I served for almost 8 years, and it was continually a discussion. And I said from the beginning, when the GCR became a thing and we changed the way we're doing church planting, I made the comment that churches support what they can see and what they can hold on to. People are that way. And so all they hear is the name Kevin Ezell. And all they hear is, well, they bought all this exorbitant property. They go to all these exorbitant things. And it's like somebody gave them a unlimited charge card and they just go and they spend it. And then they don't come back. And when we ask, we're told, well, no, we're not going to talk about that. Well, why not? What I'd like for Dr. Orr to say is address, why is CP giving off? Let's talk about really why it's off.
Well, but he gave you the reason.
He
gave you the reason.
What he thought.
Yeah, no, he gave you the reason. The reason is that expressive individualism.
Yes.
Culture's changed, and now everybody, if it's not my way, then I'm not going to participate. If it's not the way I want it, I'm not going to participate. Right. And I'm just saying, no, that is not the case.
Well, and you said something a minute ago along those lines. It has nothing whatsoever to do with culture. It has to do with accountability and the fact they don't want to do it and they're not going to do it. And what we're being asked as pastors, let's just be real and transparent. We're being asked why somebody doesn't hold them accountable and say, the Constitution says you have to do this, and either do it or these are the consequences. But none.
Yeah, it very much has to do with culture. It's just not the external culture.
Exactly.
It's the internal culture that has been created by somewhat, some would say, elitism within the convention, and the we're above and beyond you. In fact, we'll hit on it, but we don't have time to go into it. But when Chuck Kelly, the president emeritus of New Orleans, when he wrote his book, which I don't remember the name of now, but the
Best Intentions, is that?
Yeah, that's it. Best Intentions.
I've got it here on my desk.
Yeah. We'll put a link down in the comments as well, but or in the video description. But that book, one of the things that he surmised when he looked back a decade into the Great Commission resurgence was there was a clear move by the North American Mission Board trying to centralize power, trying to centralize the mission endeavor, to remove it from the state conventions, hopefully to defund the state conventions and associations so they could maintain that. What we've seen in the most recent audio files that have come out and have been reported on by the Baptist paper, thankful to the Baptist paper folks for doing that, but they've been revealing that was pretty clear. They said, look, if we just are able to stop sending the kind of money we're sending to those areas, eventually we will bleed them dry. Eventually they'll just go away because they don't have the income to survive on their own. All of those are non-partnership types of statements and a lack of cooperation on their part. Dwayne, you were going to say something. Jump in there.
Now, I was just going to use illustration to drive your point home. You know, Dr. Iorg said it was because of expressive individualism, and basically saying, we're saying if we oppose what they're wanting to do, we're saying it's my way or the highway. And I say they're the ones that are saying this. Matter of fact, the majority of the convention said, we want you to change your financial plans to say this and to disclose this information. And they come back and said, no, we're not going to do that. You're going to have to listen to the way we want it done, and here's what we're going to do. It's just
it's a trust issue. It's a trust issue. That's the bottom line. It's trust issue. Up until the GCR, did we have difficulties with the cooperative program? Of course we did. There were things that were done. We've all served on committees. We've all been in partnership states. There are things we didn't agree with, but we didn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. We continued to serve. We continued to promote it in our churches. We continued to encourage our budget increases to increase it because the basic fabric didn't change. But the fabric of what we're doing is changed. And they're not telling us why and what and how much.
Okay.
We knew exactly how many North American missionaries we had on the field, what their jobs were, and how many volunteers that were commissioned as well. We don't know any of that now.
And their salaries were all disclosed. All of that. It was not just this one huge number that nobody knew. I mean, you know, they want to talk about a couple of the individuals on NAM and how much money they made. And someone asked me about it, and I said, I had any idea. I can give you what the the whole number is for the staff, but I can't tell you who makes what or how much or even approaching what their package is.
Well, now here's where we go. Iorg's report keeps moving forward, and he basically said, "This is your fault. This is your problem. You, those who are critics of what's happening in the Cooperative Program and the SBC, you just misunderstanding. You're misunderstanding what's going on. You don't really understand." So let's look at the clip. Again, this is just 60 seconds or so, but let's look at the clip where he addresses that in this discussion as well. Hang on a second. Let me make sure. Yep, we're good. Okay, let's look at this one.
Phrase "a force for good" echoes one of my earlier messages and motivates me in my work on your behalf. Our critics and detractors continually decry our efforts and point out our shortcomings, but they seem oblivious to reality. They ignore millions of volunteer ministry hours Southern Baptists devote each year to impact communities like yours. Tens of thousands of students enrolled in our universities and our seminaries. Thousands of missionaries sharing the gospel in hard-to-reach places around the world, and hundreds of church planters starting new churches across our country. Yes, we have some problems, but they must be kept in proper perspective. We will always be an imperfect people, marred by sin and marked by sinful behavior. But even that admission defines us as a force for good, living examples of God's forgiveness and grace, which we offer to people in desperate need of that message today.
Okay, Dwayne, he's leveling the criticism. Us, those who have been critical. Do you believe the criticism is mainly a misunderstanding, or does it reflect a deeper structural problem in leadership failures or leadership issues?
I think it's I think it's leadership issues, Bobby. He said those who are complaining are ignoring, number one, the volunteer hours that are put in by thousands of Southern Baptists. I'm one of those. I know y'all are too. I volunteer just in Western North Carolina this past year, a little over a year ago, or right at a year ago now. I volunteered a week of my time going over there helping the disaster relief and helping feed people. He said, you're ignoring the students who've been trained or being trained by our seminaries. I'm one of those students, just as y'all are, been trained by. He said, we're ignoring the people who are around the globe sharing the gospel. I've been on 8 or so international mission trips, have led the churches that I pastor to go on those. We're not ignoring those. I'm one of those. But I'm saying the problem is the leadership. And if something is not done, then there's not going to be an improvement in the cooperative program.
Yeah, he addressed this further when he sent out his email. He sent out a follow-up email after there was so much upheaval online, both on X, on Facebook as well, and possibly some other platforms as well. But he sent out an email, which was published by Baptist Press as well. And Warren, how did you feel like he had addressed the critics and the issues in that email when he sent that out?
I think he blamed us. I mean, he really did. He didn't, you said the word, and I keep repeating, I'm sorry, but you said the word, he's not here. He's deaf. He's not, it's not what we're saying. And I read a quote. Can I take 2 seconds? I'd like to read this, and I'm not sure who said it, but it's in one of the documents we've got here. But over the last 2 decades, now this is a direct quote, there has been a fundamental shift in the SBC to appropriate a more traditional top-down approach with the local churches. This perhaps captured even by the comment, cooperation means you surrender control to fellow Baptists. This is directly opposite to what is stated on the SBC website regarding cooperation. I can disagree with you in areas, but that doesn't mean what he's saying that it means. And we've never been a top-down organization.
Right.
I don't know if you two did, but when I was in school, I had to write a paper about why I was a Southern Baptist. And there were two things in that piece of paper. One, believe it or not, the top reason I stayed in the SBC was because of the Cooperative Program and the way we did missions. And the other was the divinely inspired Word of God. And those two are not one better than the other. They were just, those were the two main points of my paper, that I am who I am and I am what I am because of the Cooperative Program. But when the three of us were coming through, the information was there. I mean, you could find it, like you said, Dwayne. We knew how many missionaries were on the field. We knew what they needed, and giving increased even in the 70s when money was so tight and interest rates were at all-time highs when you borrowed money. If you go back that far, CP didn't suffer like this. Nothing approaching that. We still gave our money to our church. Did we give as much money? No, because we weren't making as much money. But as far as the support of the CP, we didn't bring missionaries home in the 70s that I remember. I mean, I was a youngster, but I don't remember it. And I was in a CP giving church.
That we had an upward direction in missionaries, both on North American continent and also internationally. Now, Dwayne, one of the accusations that he makes is that the people who put his report up online just put up edited clips which presented inaccurate claims that made it appear that he was saying something he wasn't saying. Thus, as we referred to, he sent out a link to the full report and also a transcript for people to look at. You've already stated that you looked at that and looked at it repeatedly. Do you feel like he was being misrepresented? What is your feeling about that? Are the critics just being misunderstood?
I don't think the critics are being misunderstood. I think, apparently he's misunderstanding, so I'll put it that way. No, Bobby, as I already said, from the moment I heard him say what he said live, and then remember, and I immediately after he went off, I texted you and I said, because I was thinking maybe you were listening to it live. I said, this was my impression. Did you hear the same thing? And that's when you told me you didn't listen to it live. So I went back that night and listened. Now, once he sent out his email on September the 26th, that did not clarify anything in my mind. As a matter of fact, it again reassured that what I heard was what I heard, and I received it, and that he was putting all the blame on people like me. So I immediately responded to his email. And I know some people also who have responded and have received a reply from him. I still have not received a reply. And I told him in that email, and I was very kind in it, but I said, look, it didn't do anything to help me see this in any different direction. And I beg of you to reconsider. And I even checked right before we got online today to make sure that I still haven't received a reply, and I haven't. And that's, it's sad because, I'm not the least bit convinced that I misinterpreted what he said.
Warren, we jumped into this earlier and we've touched on it already, but let me ask you directly, what role does trust or lack thereof trust play in the decline in CP giving, and how can churches and SBC entities restore it? What do you think?
Oh, it's monumental. It's monumental because the only way, in my opinion, and that's what you asked, to restore trust is to be transparent. This is what we did. And not even an explanation of why necessarily, but this is what we did. This is where your money went. And from here on out, this is what we're going to do. Exactly. And that, we asked for, if I remember right, we asked for an audit. I'm not sure if it was a forensic audit, but it was an audit. And we were told no. well, excuse me, if a member of our congregations comes to the finance committee and says, hey, I think we need to have an audit of the church books, are you going to tell them no? I mean, and so I don't understand if the seminaries have to give an account and every other entity in the convention has to give an account, why doesn't the North American Mission Board? And in my opinion, if they want their money, if they want us to restore giving to that entity, then they're going to have to tell us what's going on and tell us the truth.
Yes.
That's just, and it pains me. It pains me that they're not just doing it, but they're being allowed to do it. A 35-year decline in CP giving. Wow, that's
significant.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, that's significant. Yeah.
And it's just like in churches as we've pastored them. If something's not working, don't we have a responsibility to look at it and look with our leadership and say, this isn't working? Or do we do, we've said it before, if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. And Dr. Kelly, you were talking about Dr. Kelly's book, but I think it's the second chapter of his book, he makes a comment about Dr. Aiken in addressing the seminary, Southeastern Seminary, and used the comment, Great Commission resurgence. But he defined it, according to Dr. Kelly, and I've read what he wrote, in a completely different light than what we heard in Orlando. And I've read those 12 axioms that Dr. Aiken spoke of, and it is vast. It's worlds different than what we were told. And the interesting thing about that, one more thing about that, Dr. Kelly, back before the Great Resurgence Task Force, and I'm not sure if I think he was still a professor at New Orleans, if I remember right. He wrote a paper or wrote an article about the decline of the Cooperative Program and of Southern Baptist churches. I mean, and that went as a part of this second book, but he wasn't wrong. Everything, almost point for point, everything Dr. Kelly said has come true, and it was accurate almost to the word. And and everybody, and there were a group of people who said he committed political suicide and he did this and he did that. But you know what? I have a tremendous amount of respect for him for saying the truth. And that's all I want from Kevin. Tell me the truth, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is asking for a checkbook register.
No.
A checkbook register, but I think that there needs to be some clarity. And this last annual meeting, when Messenger came up and asked Kevin Ezell, speaking of NAM, but asked Kevin Ezell about what the messengers had asked of the North American Mission Board in the previous annual meeting. And he just said, well, we just took that basically as a suggestion and we're not going to do that. And it was about, finding the help of churches beyond their funding when their funding goes out, that kind of thing. And they said, yeah, we're just not going to do that. And it's like, so it seems like we've got a systemic problem. A great system set up for the cooperative program, trustees in place, great system, trustees with our entities, et cetera, unless your trustees are not actually doing the job.
That's right.
And that's what we've seen over and over. And the trustees are told by lawyers in the entities, you don't speak out about this. You don't speak to this because you could make the entity that they're representing liable for something that the entity is not approved to do. So even if they disagree, they are told to keep their mouth shut as such, kind of have a gag order.
I do have a question, and I'm curious if you guys noticed this or have observed this. I heard Dr. Orr speak at a state convention meeting last year. And it'd been a long time since I'd heard him speak, but I was going to talk with him afterwards, and he left. He quit speaking and he walked straight out the back door and was gone. But the thing that I came away with is how angry he seemed to be at pastors and at churches about their CP giving and their some of those. I mean, his countenance. He wasn't preaching boldly in his report. He was, in my opinion, strictly in my opinion, in capital letters, he was angry, and I was concerned about that, because I understand him being concerned about the bottom line and the budget and all that. I get it, but if you're going to be angry, put the anger where be angry at the right guys, because and especially in the state in which he was speaking, they suffered greatly through some of the stuff that's happening from the North American Mission Board. That particular state was impacted because it was a pioneer state, and it was impacted greatly. And so that just concerned me. It bothered me. And that's one of the things I was going to ask him. I was going to, and I too have called him and I've emailed him and I haven't heard anything back from him. And I'm not upset with him. I don't know why his countenance is the way it is. I get the frustration. There's not one of us as a pastor that hasn't been frustrated and hasn't said things in a tone that we wish, wow, I shouldn't have said it quite that way. But he's not helping the cooperative program by doing
I had a lot of respect for Dr. Iorg for a lot of years, and actually invited him to come be a keynote speaker for our equipping conference we had when I was in Michigan. And then after I came to Atlanta to work with the Church Planting Network, we had him come in, and he was a keynote speaker for a big fundraising banquet we had here. So I had utmost respect, and he did a phenomenal job with both those times. And every other time I'd heard him speak, he'd done a great job. So just something has happened. And I did hear just today, just kind of a thread that he was looking for some way to get out, some way to move on. Rhett Burns, a pastor in South Carolina, wrote an article in the Center for Baptist Leadership saying that, hey, he needed to resign. That's starting to be a little bit of a chime there. I'm not necessarily calling for his resignation, but I really am calling, personally to say, look, you need to listen to the people in the pew. Stop listening to, cultural analysis of what's happening in the world. Why go back and look? Why have churches started negatively designating? What is their reason? What is their purpose? Listen to guys like you and me who are in normative sized churches. And I understand none of our churches are giving at a level that if we stop giving all together, they're going to go, oh no, the cooperative program's going to die. And the problem is that's how they view it. When in the past, the cooperative program was looked at, look, it's not about how much you give, it's the level of sacrifice. And if we're all sacrificing, we all can do together moving forward what we couldn't do alone. And what is happening now is people are putting on the brakes. They're saying, whoa, hey, stop, hang on. We need to know how you're using our mission money. Our people are sacrificing. We've got little widows and widowers that are giving out of their Social Security checks and they're tithing, and they want to know their money is being well spent. Why can't we get some transparency? It seems to be a huge issue.
And that's the key, Bobby, is that in the past, yes, I've had difference of opinions and thought maybe they could be doing stuff better, but I've never questioned or wondered how the money was being spent. That was never a question in my mind until very recent history, and within the last decade. So it isn't about not being satisfied with the church planting movement versus evangelism or whatever the case might be. It's simply about being transparent and just being open with us. If it's not a problem, then just be open, and I think that would settle this whole issue.
Right, and I'm with both of you. I don't want him to resign. That's not what my conversation is with him. Back when, and I don't know if you guys have like children, Baptist children's homes in your community. I know Georgia does because I was in that state. But when I was in Florida, my mother was on staff at the Florida Baptist Children's Homes in Miami, and I did some capital giving campaign work with them. And one of the things that a man by the name of Dr. Jim Souls told me one time, he said, let me tell you something. He said, this organization was built on WMU groups and Baptist men's groups all over the state of Florida that gave, $50 here and $75 there. And he said, in any capital giving campaign, I'd much rather have 118 or 120 WMU groups, Baptist men's groups, any group like that in the local church to give than I had to go and do $1 million donor that's going to give me $1 million once. And I wonder sometimes if these gentlemen don't need to look at that. I mean,
well, the reality is part of the shift that happened with the GCR, and part of what was driving that, I said it a little earlier, part of what was driving that were these large mega churches that were not wanting to give where they couldn't control the money. So right. They were designating to Annie Armstrong, to IMB, Lottie Moon, or whatever, and they were designating huge sums of money, but they weren't getting credit for being cooperative because their cooperative program giving was at 1% of their undesignated gifts. And so by changing to Great Commission giving, now all this is blanketed together. This is all cooperative giving, and they are still in control. And so now that's led us from that point back in 2011 now to where we are today, on top of the lack of transparency and everything else. Well, let me ask you this as we're wrapping up. Looking forward, just real quick, let's hit a couple of things. Dwayne, what practical steps would you see are necessary to rebuild the cooperation and trust in the SBC?
Well, obviously the big thing is transparency, and I think the best way to communicate that is to reconnect with the local churches. We have an entity here in my state that has gone through some issues and funding issues, and so that's what I'm suggesting to them, and part of an advisory committee now to do just that, to reconnect them with the local churches. And I think that's what Southern Baptists have lost, in particular, I'll say with NAM. Yes, well, we have international missionaries when they're on furlough come through our church all the time. But I haven't seen, and I would certainly invite them to, but I haven't seen that local connection with NAM. So transparency, and you can do that by directly communicating with us.
Warren, how about you? A couple of quick practical steps. What do you think?
Two things. I think number one, I think we need to go back to following the guidelines that were set up. We didn't have these problems when we followed the rules. I use the word rule. That's kind of a bad word, but when we followed the Constitution and there was never a question. And then secondly, I think we need to encourage our trustees to enforce the policies and the constitution of the entities and the main entity. They were designed to carry on the convention's business in the interim between June to June, and in my opinion, I think they need to go back and re-examine what their jobs are, and I think they need to do their jobs. And I don't think, and somehow we've got to get it out of the hands of these, talking about these mega churches. Money shouldn't be the thing that talks. It should be, there are more churches that run under 100 in Sunday school in the Southern Baptist Convention than there are churches that run over 250 in Sunday school. And I think that we need to remember that. And those pastors and those churches need to be represented, and they need to be heard. And I think the major problem is, the next word I would use is learn to listen. Listen to the pew. Listen to your pastors. Not all of us have an agenda. Not all of us have a hidden agenda. You know what my agenda is? Let's get the gospel to the four corners of the earth like we're supposed to. Let's put our missionaries on the field. Let's make sure they're getting paid. Let's make sure their living conditions are what they're supposed to be. I don't begrudge anybody that's on the state level or the national level, the automobile they drive, the house they live in, the salary package they have. I just want to know what it is. How do I support it? I think we need to go back to the basics, go back to what was set out in 1925, and let's re-examine it. I think about some of these pastors like Dr. Criswell. What would he think? What would he say? Emmett Ray, one of our foreign missionaries. What would he say?
Right.
Examining what we're doing now.
Right. Well, it's been such a significant shift, and I think there's no question that the lack of transparency is one of the big things. And you use the word listen. I think the entities need to listen. That when the choir's chorus is constantly transparency, and the lack of trust and the continual rise in designated giving or restrictive giving as they give through the cooperative program, that ought to raise the awareness on the national level of saying, look, you need to listen. This isn't going to change. And I know that Dwayne's church and Warren's church and Bobby's church or whoever's church, these are mostly small churches. And the total amount given is not very big. But each of us who are pastoring a church, every pastor has a responsibility for leading their congregation as a shepherd, and good stewardship is part of good shepherding. So yes. Good stewardship is part of good shepherding. And a pastor comes to a point, just like I've got a bunch of letters in my file from pastors who have withdrawn from the SBC or have started restrictive giving. And they've sent me a copy of what they have sent to the executive committee saying, we're no longer going to be a part of the SBC. Now, some of them are continuing to be in the SBC through their state convention and through their association, but they've totally cut out what they're doing through the executive committee because of the lack of trust that they're seeing in various entities and the reporting that is not taking place. It's a sad thing. I think CP giving is not going to take a turn to increase if we keep hammering the local church, hammering the local pastors where we are. If we don't listen, I think they need to listen to what's being said and take steps that actually help with that rather than seem to confront it, no doubt. Well, guys, we need to wrap up. We're out of time, but thank you so much for joining today and being a part of our conversation today as we look at exactly what is going on in the SBC, especially relative to the Southern Baptist Convention. It's been great to have both of you today.